find a starting point that's as close to what you're trying to create as possible. So you guys don't know any of these, but I mean, if we're going to create a door, we'd hit door. Or if we're going to create a new column or casework, we'd hit those two. What we're doing is creating a curtain wall panel. So let's start there. And this is going to look really foreign to you guys. So essentially, let's just walk through a little bit of what we have here. So you have these, if I hover over that, we have these reference planes. We are right now in a floor plan level. You can be in a 3D view. You can be in an elevation. This is essentially a separate Revit file that is created for families and that we're going to insert into our Revit model later. Okay, so it's a completely separate file. And the way it works is that each, it just happens that for a curtain wall panel, it lays out a kind of a reference plane that everything on this side is the exterior, everything on this side of that reference plane is interior, and it has kind of what would be the left reference plane, a right reference plane, and then a center. You'll note that there is an equal here. So if I move this one out, the other one moves out as well. Okay, because they are tied together as equal. So they're always going to move together. I could change that, but let's not do that. All right, now let's go to an exterior elevation. You can kind of see how that works. So this has, again, the left. Let's make, I'll go to the interior so it look, it's referencing right. So that's the left plane. This is the right plane. This down here, well, that's the level. If I could tab through and get to the actual plane, you'll see that that is, well, it doesn't call it out, but it's the reference plane that is the base, and this is the top. Okay, so what we want to do, let's go back to our image. We're going to create this kind of outside. We use these the left and right and top and the bottom as this kind of outside bit. So we're going to start there. So the way that families work is that you get these kind of new tools. And each one of these, I'll just roll over them, kind of allow you to create different types of modeling. So in an extrusion, I can draw a rectangle, or in this case, is drawing a kind of outside profile, means a couple of interior profiles, and when you extrude it, it's going to create kind of that mass and then a void for those interior rectangles. The blend tool is kind of, the icons I think really good at showing you. It's kind of two different types of polygons that are spaced vertically apart, and then they blend between the two to make some type of mass. Revolve, I think you kind of getting the picture. You have an axis, you have a profile. It rotates around that axis either 360, you could tell it to be 90 or 180. It'll do it as much around that axis as far as you want. Sweep, you should be aware of this. I mean, some of these should sound familiar from Rhino, right? So sweep, you can create a three-dimensional polyline and a profile, and it'll sweep it across it. And the sweep blend is kind of basically tying sweep and the blend tool that we just went over together. Okay, and then we have void forms. We'll get into that here in a second. Okay, so let's start with extrusion. Let's go to rectangle. We're going to draw right on top of the reference planes, and then once we get done, you'll see that we have these locks. We're going to actually lock each one of them. Essentially, we want we don't know how big our panel needs to be. The reference planes are going to allow us to basically shrink or grow the panel accordingly, whatever it needs. So it's going to basically do the work for us. So we're going to lock them and say okay. We should note its extrusion end and start. And this is important. We're going to go back to the reference floor plan level. What's happening right now is that this is extruding from this plane toward the interior. And I think the way we want to extrude is we want it to be always centered on this plane. So how would you do that? Well, I'll show you. So we'll select it, and we're going to change the, essentially we want this panel to be 3 inches thick. So I'm going to just go ahead and put this as negative 1.5. Make sure you put the inches at the end of it. And then this one at positive 1.5. And you can see we're good to go. Alright, so that's the beginning, but let's go, we also reference we want this to then be able to insert another panel inside of that. So if we go to the interior view, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a void form. In the void form, you see you have the same tools. So we're going to use extrusion again. We're just going to go inside of, let's do a rectangle. We go inside of this and just kind of draw it willy-nilly. And again, this would want to be, we'll just make it bigger than the other, so it'll be 2 inches, negative 2 inches, and then positive 2 inches. So it definitely will penetrate through the extrusion we just made. And we'll say okay. And so really quickly we can look at the 3D view and kind of see that we now have, instead of just a solid panel, we have this void. Alright, so the next thing is that this void really, it looks about right, but it probably isn't exactly right because we just kind of drew it freehand. So if we look at the image, we're going to say that that's 1.5 inches right there, that dimension. So how do we make this fit perfectly 1.5 inches? Specifically when this panel is going to shrink and expand, however we need it to, given our building. So to do that, what I want you to do is grab the dimension tool. I want you to select, be careful, don't select the side of the extrusion, select the actual reference, and then select the interior, that void, and just place it anywhere. Then do that the same for each direction. So I'm always going to grab the reference plane first, then the interior, and then I'm going to grab, now this one's tricky, you want to make sure I'm grabbing the reference, and then here. Alright, so you can see that even though it looked about right, it really wasn't, and none of these are 1.5 inches. So how do we make that happen? Well, this is another really cool feature. We're going to create a parameter, and that parameter we're going to be able to control. And so the next step is to modify a dimension. Go up here under label, and here we're going to create a parameter. So we're going to call this aluminum frame. Okay, that exterior, or maybe we should call it, kind of exterior. We'll keep it at that. Aluminum frame. And stay with types. Say OK. And then we're going to select each one of these dimensions. And we're going to go up here, grab that triangle, and make them all aluminum frame. So now you can see they all changed to the same thing. But this still isn't right. So how do we make that right? If I click on it, I don't know if this will work. We'll try it. Well, it did work, but it didn't work the way we wanted it to. We're going to change it to 1.5 inches. So that's one way to do it. Actually, I didn't know that was going to work. The other way to do it is go to Family Types. And then here you'll see if we had other parameters, they would all kind of be built up in a list here underneath the aluminum frame. And so if we wanted to change this to, say, 6 inches, we can see it all working. We don't want to do that. We'll cancel that. Oop. Change it back. Okay. So the next thing we want to test is to make sure that our reference lines are working and that the dimension is staying locked in. Okay. Let's see if we can grab this one. All right. Okay. Don't mess with the bottom one. That one just locked in. It's already locked to this level, so it's all good. All right, so that is the beginning. So let's just check our 3D view. That looks great. So that's the first step in the panel, but we still have more work to do. Okay, we'll do that in the next video.